This episode is sponsored by my friends at Bloomerang. You already know your donors care. You see it in every gift and every note that comes back with a check. What you might not know is what they're telling us right now in the data. Bloomerang's 2026 Giving Signal Report surveyed more than 1,000 active donors. 91% say people need more help than ever, and 94% give more when they know exactly where their gift goes. The generosity's there. What's changed isn't the impulse to give. It's what donors need from you to say yes. The question is whether your organization is listening. Bloomerang's giving platform is built for purpose, to help you understand your donors, to help you act on the right signals, and most importantly, to help you raise more. Download the free 2026 Giving Signal Report at bloomerang.com. That's BLOOMERANG.com. And now on to the episode. Hello, and welcome to Nonprofit Nation. I'm your host, Julia Campbell, and I'm going to sit down with nonprofit industry experts, fundraisers, marketers, and everyone in between to get real and discuss what it takes to build that movement that you've been dreaming of. I created the Nonprofit Nation podcast to share practical wisdom and strategies to help you confidently find your voice, definitively grow your audience, and effectively build your movement. If you're a nonprofit newbie or an experienced professional who's looking to get more visibility, reach more people, and create even more impact, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. This is Nonprofit Nation with your host, Julia Campbell. Excited to be here today to answer this question and hopefully get some good advice. What does it take to grow a nonprofit without exhausting your team, overwhelming your board, or burning yourself out in the process? This week on Nonprofit Nation, I'm joined by nonprofit consultant, fundraising strategist, and leadership expert, Sarah Andrews. She's the founder and lead consultant at Andrews Consulting. And this conversation will talk about what sustainable growth really looks like, especially in today's nonprofit landscape and the world that we're living in today. So, Sarah, welcome. So happy to have you on the podcast and to meet you.
Hi there. Yes, thank you so much for having me. And I'm excited to meet you and to be here.
Yes. Tell us about your journey into fundraising and how you got started with working with nonprofits on fundraising and growth.
Yeah, you got it. I mean, I like to think my journey started as a brownie in a Girl Scout troop when I was like 7 or 8 years old. But my professional journey started right out of college. I grew up in Manchester, New Hampshire, and I ended up back here working for our local soup kitchen at the time, back in the early 2000s. And it was still kind of old school fundraising happening back then, and have worked my way through working with a handful of different organizations early in my career. Worked for the national organization, Muscular Dystrophy Association, and then locally in higher ed and a faith-based organization that eventually led me to opening my own business about 10 years ago. And I haven't looked back since.
Oh, wow. That's so awesome. Yeah, we realized we were sort of kind of neighbors. Manchester's not far from where I live. So in your work that you do now, what have you seen that really separates nonprofits that grow and thrive from those that seem to stay stuck?
Yeah, it's such a great question considering it's a bit of a moving target with the current landscape. But the things that come to mind are the teams. So the actual human beings behind the work, the leadership team, the staff team, working cohesively and communicating well with the board of directors. I think with a fundraising lens, the relationships being key to really any part of sustainable fundraising. So putting relationships first is really another thing. And I think in general, having a plan, often more than just a strategic plan, but an actual growth plan and the right people on board. Like I said, communicating well and all hands on deck where the sustaining the organization doesn't feel like it falls on just one person or just the leader, but it's more of a team effort.
Yeah. So teams are just such a huge part of success as well. I talked to an HR expert recently just about how the nonprofit world is so different than the business world in terms of attracting and retaining talent. And I read a statistic in the Chronicle of Philanthropy is something about 85% of fundraisers are planning on leaving their job in the next 2 years. And half of them are not even going to go back into nonprofits. So with this constant pressure to do more with less, what can leaders of nonprofits do, or what can we do to sustain our organizations without completely burning ourselves out and burning the candle at both ends?
Yeah, it's such a tough thing to actually do in practice. And I say that sort of like validating nonprofit leaders that are out there, because I have been a nonprofit leader myself, and it is often difficult to have yourself at the top of the priority list when there are many fires to be dealt with. But I think it starts with modeling good boundaries and self-care as leaders and as board members. So actually taking your PTO, eating enough food and drinking enough water to sustain yourself during the day, getting enough sleep. I know it sounds like some basic things, but I think that's where my mind goes to begin with, because I work with so many nonprofit leaders that I think sometimes aren't even covering those basics, where it's like, hey, maybe just a 10-minute walk outside midday, even though that feels like, well, I've got all this other stuff I need to do. I'm going to sit at my desk and quickly eat and move on to the next thing. But it's actually in practice taking time away from the work, taking a break during the day, modeling boundaries so that your staff can follow suit and have a space where they can do the same. So that's one thought that comes to mind. Another thought that comes to mind is, equitable pay, posting pay ranges for salaries, and knowing that to hire and retain good leadership, we do have to pay them well. I know it's nonprofit in the title, but in the hiring space, it can be competitive. So I think that's an important piece to remember too, is to pay people well and compensate them with good benefits and time off and all that good stuff.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. That's funny. You said that about the water and the food, because sometimes it'll be noon and I will look up from my desk and say, oh my gosh, I've only had a cup of coffee. Like, where did the day go?
Yeah. And I'm the same way. And then it's like, oh, well, I only have time for like a quick granola bar or something like quickly before the next thing. So even though we might be more in the consultant space, we're still ingrained as nonprofit folks at the end of the day.
No, that is true. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I see that all the time. What are some huge misconceptions around fundraising that you think are holding nonprofits back?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, it's that people have a hesitancy around believing that fundraising has to do with asking. And I mean, while that can sometimes be true, I think of asking more as inviting. And I like to sort of like teach that concept to kind of let our brains off the hook. And so, if what I said earlier is true, that it's really based on relationships, then inviting can feel a little bit more natural, like almost like, we just had 4th of July, inviting people to a barbecue. If you invite the right number of people, even if a few can't come or have to decline, the party still goes on. You can still invite those people, yes or no, next year, once again. And everyone brings something different, but it's all valuable, right? Some people might want a burger or hot dog. Others might want the macaroni salad, whatever the case is. So I just like to think of fundraising as inclusive and kind of like, what's the other side of the story that we sometimes tell ourselves? Right? Sometimes it's, I wouldn't want to bother anyone, or that might be too much to ask that person, right? Or what if I offend someone? In all my 25 years, I can't really think of a time where someone was offended or, didn't want to feel included in whatever it was, whether they had to decline or accept. So that's, I think, the biggest misconception is that it's icky or salesy in nature, because I think it's actually so much more like warm and inclusive in nature. And we're all conduits to making a difference, however we show up, whether it's with our time, our resources, our money, our ideas. So I don't know, I could probably go on for more than an episode about all of that, but that's my little snippet about like inviting versus asking, and that it actually feels good when you think of it that way.
How do we change that mindset? And, and actually, as fundraisers, hopefully we don't have that mindset. I think thinking you're annoying your donors or that you're bothering them is definitely not going to help you grow your organization. But how do we convince other people, like board members or other staff members, that me personally, I think fundraising is something everyone should be a part of. Like there's maybe one or two people, maybe a department, but I think everyone has a role in, like you said, the inviting.
Yeah, so I think it is in practice and in sharing stories. So we had a group that we're working with recently with a capital campaign where many of the folks on the leadership committee, staff and board members, while they're very passionate and big supporters, they hadn't really found themselves in those, one-on-one or two-on-two type of meaningful, inviting kind of conversations. And so I think what I've observed as they've gotten started with their leadership gift outreach is that each meeting they come back with like their shoulders more relaxed. The way they're talking about it is with more excitement. It's been like observing someone where you're like trying to explain to them about how to ride a bike. Yes. And you can talk about it and tell about it. You could even show a video or write something down. But until the person gets on and establishes that balance and starts to pedal a little bit, they have to figure it out a little bit for themselves and experience it. So I think the best anecdote is experiencing and being part of a meaningful conversation, inviting support, because everyone that I've worked with then wants to do more of it.
Yes.
They then have ideas about who else they could talk to and others that they could invite, because I think, not to say it like this, but it's like not as bad as they thought it was going to be.
Right. Not as
and
scary.
That's their words, not mine. But so I think it's through experience and willingness, which is not always easy to accomplish those two things together.
No, I don't. Yeah, I agree. Getting training, and it is just the experience of it. You have to go through that. And when people get that gift, or when they do a successful crowdfunding campaign, or, they get that grant, the feeling is really, you could tell people, but it's pretty hard to describe. So capital campaigns, major fundraising initiatives, if someone comes to you and says, we have a big fundraising project coming up, what is one of the first things you look at to see if they're ready?
A few things come to mind right away. I would go back to sort of that team and that willingness, right? Who are the folks behind it? What has the planning been up to that point? Is everyone all on board and kind of ready to move in that direction? That's one big piece. The other thing I think is their historical fundraising efforts and stewardship touch points that they're doing. So one way to ensure readiness for a future campaign is to have great stewardship, good back end processes, thanking donors, building relationships with donors. So those are, I would say, the first couple of things that I would look at without knowing, too much more about it. And then the next level might be a little bit more in the weeds about systems being used. How much you're raising annually, year over year, tells us a lot about a goal that we might set for a large campaign or a fundraising endeavor that's more of a one-time, because we would always want to see that annual fundraising continue to grow alongside a capital campaign and not take away from. So I think strong annual fundraising efforts, a strong team, and really great stewardship are the main points I would look at.
Yeah, I do think, everyone listening to this is going to say, "Oh, we need more, we need to raise more, we need to raise more." And that's just something that is a constant drumbeat for organizations. But a lot, well, I don't even know if it's a lot, but I know some organizations launch these massive campaigns and do not have the infrastructure or even, like you just said, the donor stewardship. Because what I see in my work with digital marketers and digital fundraisers is that acquisition is so important, but the stewardship piece often gets lost by the wayside. And I think that's really affecting fundraising as a whole. So what are you seeing on the ground? Are you seeing that people are giving less? I know that the data is showing small dollar donors are disappearing. The data, the fundraising effectiveness project data is showing that money is still being given. I mean, Giving Tuesday, billions were raised on Giving Tuesday, but the small dollar donors, the sort of bread and butter of our industry. And, are you seeing that? And what do you think is causing it?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a combination of things. I think what I would tell you about new donors is they won't always fall from the sky with a five-figure check, right? They might show up at something small. They might give to a walk or an event or a day of giving at a $50 level, $100 level to kind of see how that feels. How do you communicate now? How do you continue to include me? And so I think a few things come into play here. The first thing I would say is donor retention is key. So before I even go into talking about like acquisition, giving amounts, whatever amount those donors are giving and for whatever duration of time they have been giving, it's very important to have strong efforts in keeping existing donors. Because if there's a leak there, then acquiring new donors and putting a lot of new plans in place won't quite matter if we can't keep and retain the donors we have. So it kind of goes back into that stewardship piece that I was talking about. But I would say, as far as donor retention or bringing in some of those smaller donors, when we think about the great wealth transfer that is upon us, that might mean that new donors, their entry point, their entry amount of giving is different than what we might have been seeing 10 years ago or 20 years ago, right? When we were first getting started, things have changed quite a bit. There's a lot more online giving. So what is your online giving experience? If my friend told me about your organization today and I just went to the good old Google and found you and decided I wanted to make a contribution, how many clicks are there? What are the giving levels? What is the impact that's shared with me? How quickly will I be thanked? And then, I'm a fan of a stewardship loop that everybody receives, whether they gave $10 or $10,000. There's multiple thank you touch points to that donation so that we're not overlooking what we would call participation gifts, which might be, under $500 or under a certain threshold. So I'll get off my soapbox, but I guess I would say, thank you touch points, focusing on donor retention, maybe having some stats or year over year record keeping about number of donors, average gift amount, new donors, particular touch points to new donors so they feel very welcome. Those are some things that I'm sort of seeing on the implementation side to negate if there is donor loss or there is the average gift size is slightly going down year over year, but we're acquiring a certain amount so that we're making up for it in that budget line. So I think there's a lot of work that can still be done to maintain individual giving and to build relationships with younger, and by younger I mean like millennial donors that might be inheriting funds that they will choose to be philanthropic with, which I do believe is happening.
That's so interesting. Donor retention, donor stewardship, so important. And I think that in our, frenzy to be posting, to be communicating, to answering emails, to being everywhere in the community, that piece does get a little bit lost. And I've also I've talked to organizations that think their donors don't want to hear from them. They're annoying them. They're busy. I'm thinking they are busy, but they raised their hand and they said, I want to participate. I want to be a part of this. This cause is important to me. So it's worth, creating that relationship with them. In addition to your nonprofit work, your bio says you're a yoga instructor. How has it sort of maybe influenced the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so I have been a yogi for a long time. The yoga that I practice is a hot vinyasa, so like a power yoga.
And I was hot doing yoga. I loved it. Like Bikram?
Yeah, it's not Bikram, although I have done Bikram. It's more like creative flows and there's music playing, which is nice. So I teach at Humble Warrior, which is here in Manchester, and they have a few other locations as well out towards the seacoast. It's amazing. I got my yoga teacher certification during COVID, so it was a bit of a wild time. I taught my first practice class virtually to my daughter, who was 7 at the time. She's 14 now, but she does still do yoga. So it's a gift for me to share the practice with others. I teach Saturday morning. We have a lot of fun with it. I like to play like 90s hip hop throwbacks. So we have a lot of fun.
Oh my gosh. I wish I lived closer.
And it connects with my work. Like sometimes I feel it happening where I'm meeting with a nonprofit leader and I'm like, oh, here comes the yoga teacher hat. They need to give themselves a little grace, right? Like I'll hold your feet to the fire, sure, right? We'll fundraise, we'll kick ass. But I'm also a fan of giving grace and like validation if things are hard, and having a safe space, really, whether it's in the yoga studio or on a Zoom or, whatever the spaces are that I work, that's important to me. So it gives me that lens, sometimes. And some of my clients will tell you, like, I'll break into okay, we're going to do a couple sun salutations. We need to like get the energy back here. And we'll do yoga, especially some of the groups that have like youth coming into the office. I'm like, all right, everybody, let's do some pro pose. Let's get weird for a minute. And it works. And then we focus again after.
It's just like, it's a good icebreaker too, I would bet, for a big group, and gets everyone involved in like any kind of physical activity. Will get the blood pumping and the brains moving, like especially if there's just a very long board meeting going on.
Right?
Yeah. Or
you just need some like deep breath work here. Yeah.
I like that because it's important, like you said, to give yourself grace. And that's not something that I think we do often enough. That's not something our bosses give to us. That's not something that our board members or our people that are in our organizations, give to us. There's just so much pressure on fundraisers. So when they're facing this tremendous pressure, especially right now, the tendency that I'm seeing, and we were just both at ICON, the AFP International Conference in San Diego, is to say, well, it's the economy. Gas is, $5 a gallon. Everything's costing more. So people are giving less. So they don't want to be asking more. And so therefore they're raising less money. But with the pressure, with this environment that we're in, nonprofits are under attack right and left from the federal government, from everywhere. What advice do you have for fundraisers to sort of stay on track, stay positive, just kind of keep things going?
Yeah, I'm going to keep going on my like yoga path a little bit. I don't know if this is where you were thinking fine. This would go, but like I think it's an internal reflection point for everybody. So like, why are you in this role in this moment in time? What does the next level call for? It's probably not held in the belief system that things are hard, people don't want to give, the economy is terrible, funders are not available. That energy isn't it, right? So there's a mindset, there's an ownership of like, hey, you're not a teacher or a dentist or an astronaut. You're saving your corner of the world in some way with the work that you're doing. You were called to it. I was called to it. The people we work with, you're called to it. So like, it's a little like shoulder shaking moment for all of us to say, what does the next level call for? If we were graduating from the middle school version of our work to high school, which by the way, my older daughter is doing. So it's like, what's the summer reading list? What's the course catalog for freshman year? What does the next level call for of all of us? And our minds need to shift about how hard things are, how easy things are, the way it has been versus the way it needs to be. There's sort of a shaking it out inflection point that is upon us all. And so that's what I think needs to happen internally, and personally as individuals, as we show up with that responsibility, and as our teams, our boards, our donors, everybody, the entire earth and beyond.
I like that. Just kind of shaking ourselves out of it. And also Woodrow Rosenbaum, who is the chief data officer for Giving Tuesday, he always says, this is not something that's happening to us. This is something we can sort of control. We can control how much we ask. We can control how many times we communicate. We can control donor stewardship. We can't control what goes on outside the organization, but in terms of fundraising, we do have control over the messages and the vibe, like you just said, that we're putting out. So I'm such a firm believer in that. And when you work with a person or people that are just kind of Debbie Downers, it really brings down the whole organization, right?
Yeah, and I think that can happen sometimes with boards who don't have term limits, right? And so folks remember, like, it was hard when we did this before, or something didn't work when we tried it. So I do think, like, that's why we were talking about validation before. Like, yeah, that was tough a few years ago. What's the evidence now why we shouldn't try again? I'm just curious about what would happen if everyone had 5 new businesses to reach out to, or if everyone just sent 3 text messages to try to get meeting with a potential donor on the calendar. So I like the bite size, do it now kind of thing. And if we can leverage numbers, doing small tasks, small outreaches, that's the answer here. It isn't that the executive director has to start writing more thank you notes. It's how could we get the board helping? How could we get volunteers when they're here? For the last 15 minutes of their shift, everybody writes 5 or 6 note cards. So I think it's thinking about ways that we can continue to grow and evolve. And to your point, anytime you think to yourself, I have to do this, I've got to do that, we get to. It's our choice to, right? We show up, we get to make this difference every day. So those little mindset shifts can help. And we're all human after all, right? We're telling ourselves little stories all the time about how things are, how things have been. So we have to shake that out a little bit, I think, for this next iteration.
The bite-sized things, that's so important, because it's almost like analysis paralysis, or people just saying, oh, well, there's no way that we could send every donor a thank you note. We don't have the time. We don't have the bandwidth. Okay, we'll send 5 of them a thank you note and see what happens. And then maybe the next day, write 2 thank you notes. Like, do it in a way that is not completely overwhelming, because I know if you look at your donor database or you look at your fundraising numbers you have to hit, it's hard to see, the forest for the trees in that way. So I wanted to ask you also about fundraising trends, some things that you're seeing, like what's worth exploring, maybe what's getting a little too much hype.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing quite a bit of is events are a little bit more difficult than they maybe have been in years past. So decision making with events as it pertains to sponsors or guests, even, things seem to just not happen as quickly and as smoothly as before. So I think the trend with events is like weekend events are difficult to maintain. Full gala type events are a little bit difficult to maintain. I've seen a couple groups this year do really well with adding a theme, which I'll be honest, I'm not like a huge fan of themed events, but like, hey, if it's raising you more money and folks are getting behind it, I'm all for it. I'm seeing the strategy around grants is a lot of folks were turning to grants in times of need. Like we'll write more grants. So like we'll go for bigger grants. I don't know that that's the solution either. I think it's like, how do we work smarter and not harder? Right. So the spray and pray and just do as many grants as possible is not necessarily working.
No.
But the local and regional relationship building with actual trustees and decision makers, that is working, and more of a focus on relationships with individual donors, corporate donors. It's not like a phone it in and email and hope they'll support again this year. It really has to be cultivated, intentional relationships. And if you don't have the team to maintain that, then tapping on the board and tapping on some folks where everyone maybe has a dozen relationships that they maintain instead of the traditional, like, oh, there's a major gifts officer with portfolios. That's not necessarily where all nonprofits are at, but knowing who holds the relationship key with certain folks is really important. So I'm seeing those things as trends. In addition, we've all been hearing more about membership giving or monthly giving for a long time, peer-to-peer giving. I think these are also great ways for acquisition strategies. But to do those well, it does take having strong ambassadors to be out there doing that outreach, sharing about it to their network and helping spread the word. So those are a handful of things that I'm seeing.
I see that with monthly giving and the subscription giving, because it's just such a trend. Everything that I do is monthly. So it's just another, it's something else to add to what I'm already doing. I definitely like that trend a lot. So what is giving you hope right now in this crazy time that we're living in this moment? How are you staying resilient?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. I think like for me, coming back to what we were talking about earlier about self-care and boundaries, like I am always recharging with time with my family and, fun things that we do. So we just had, a fun weekend swimming and going to fireworks and out to ice cream and that kind of stuff. So recharging definitely gives me that hope and that energy to come out and lead and work with other leaders. And the other thing that gives me hope is the generosity that I get to witness. People really showing up with their time, their passion, donors showing up with their support. I'm always in awe and feel really blessed that I get to celebrate on many levels with many different nonprofits all the time. Yeah. So I don't take for granted, that we get to see the difference that we make. And so that's always like giving me a little more hope for the next thing.
Oh, I love that. How can people connect with you, learn more about your work, connect with you, and communicate?
Yeah, I'm always game for a quick chat. And I too have a podcast, so I'd love to have you on my podcast. But yeah, my website is sarahjandrews.com, and there's a way to contact me there. And LinkedIn, social media is a good way as well.
Okay, great. I'll put all of those links in the show notes so any of my listeners can connect with you. But thanks so much for just being here, for helping organizations through this tough time, for helping them raise more money and grow even stronger and accomplish more impact. So I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, I appreciate you having me and everything that you're doing as well. And I see a lunch date in our future now that I know how close we are. So Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, hey there. I wanted to say thank you for tuning into my show and for listening all the way to the end. If you really enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, and you'll get new episodes downloaded as soon as they come out. I would love if you left me a rating or a review, because this tells other people that my podcast is worth listening to. And then me and my guests can reach even more earbuds and create even more impact. So that's pretty much it. I'll be back soon with a brand new episode. But until then, You can find me on Instagram at JuliaCampbell77. Keep changing the world, you nonprofit unicorn.